Hey there! The question that seems to be on everyone's mind is, why did Rivian put LiDAR on the R2? Well, marketing is telling us all about all the extra things it can see and the extra safety, but I think there's another bigger reason that they're not talking about. So let's get into it. The R2 is right around the corner and there's a lot of hype about it. Just today, Rivian actually released some images of the initial builds coming off of the actual production line in Illinois. These are some validation builds, so they still have some time before the customer vehicles start coming off of the same production line, but it won't be much longer. It'll be here before we know it. And even though the initial run of R2 won't include the LiDAR, it is coming later this year, and everyone seems to be asking questions about it. Why does Rivian need a LiDAR when so many of their competitors don't? Well, they do have some reasons that they put out there as far as safety and extra redundancy. And while these things are true, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, I don't think that's the primary reason they're putting LiDAR on their vehicles. But before we can talk about their primary reasoning, we need to talk about exactly what LiDAR is and why it's different from the other sensors. Real quick though, if you find these videos interesting and you're buying a Rivian, use my referral code down below. It'll give you up to 500 points on the Rivian shop, and you'll get 3 months of free charging on the Rivian Adventure Network, which is pretty cool. First of all, what does LiDAR even mean? Well, it's just kind of a silly word that we made up. We had radar and we have light that we're using in a similar way to radar, so we just called it LiDAR. And basically the way that it works is you have a laser, you point it at an object, you wait for the light to bounce back, you see how long it takes to bounce back, and you know how far it is away. So when you have a LiDAR array like those big crazy spinny things that you see on top of a Waymo, basically it's just a whole row of lasers all shooting out in a line that are getting the depth reading of how far away things are. And as it spins around, this line of lasers gets a whole bunch of readings from a whole bunch of different angles and builds a 3D picture of what's around you. Quick correction from Editor Mike. In Waymo's implementation, it turns out they aren't using like the super old style that does have a whole row of lasers. It uses sort of like a hybrid band steering thing where the mirror moves back and forth, but the whole thing still does spin. So it is still a spinning beast. But anyway, just a quick semantic correction I wanted to make. Back to the video. This is a little bit different from how a camera works, where a camera has much higher resolution and it's able to see a lot more detail. But cameras inherently aren't able to sense depth. They can't see how far away things are. And using some AI magic and some computer vision tricks, you can infer depth, but it's not super accurate like LiDAR is. LiDAR is an incredibly accurate mechanism. So that's why you see all of these crazy autonomous vehicles like Waymo with insane LiDARs all around them, because it's a very precise and very detailed depth reading of exactly how far away things are. Radars do get depth readings, but not at the same level of detail that LiDAR does. So that's the basics of LiDAR. That said, the LiDAR that's going on the R2 is not one of these crazy spinning beasts, as Vidya put it on Autonomy Day. It's a much smaller, more sleek, compact unit. Instead of having a big thing that's spinning around at high speed, it has a little tiny mirror inside that vibrates at microscopic levels that sends the laser shooting in different directions so it can get different readings from different areas. It's much more compact, a lot cheaper, and a lot more reliable. So it's safe to say that LiDAR technology has advanced a lot in the last few years to make it smaller, cheaper, and just a better fit for a production vehicle. The truth is, even though Rivian's vehicles have radars on them and soon LiDARs on them, it is mostly a camera-based system, and they've made no secret about that. 99% of the driving is done with the cameras, just like it is on Tesla's stack. And you need to be able to train these cameras to understand how far away things are. And this is where LiDAR comes into play. When they drive the ground truth vehicle around, they're gathering data from the vehicle cameras that ship on regular consumer vehicles, as well as the highly detailed depth information that comes from the LiDAR. By cross-referencing the data that's coming from these two different sets of sensors, you can train the AI on how to perceive depth more accurately and understand situations with more clarity when they're doing their driving. And this brings me to what I think is the real reason that Rivian is putting LiDAR on the R2. It takes an immense amount of training data to get the cameras to a point where they're able to perceive the world and understand it well enough with their 2D perspective in a 3D world. Tesla was able to achieve this by selling millions of vehicles and gathering just boatloads of data from all of these vehicles. And it takes an immense amount of training data and time to get to where they've been. Rivian doesn't have the same luxury. Now more than ever, time is of the essence. It is going to become a major buying decision in the near future if a vehicle has autonomous capabilities, and Rivian is very set on being competitive in that marketplace. And beyond that, Rivian just doesn't have the fleet size in order to train at the same scale. Even with the R2, which is going to be their high volume seller, it's going to take them a long time to be able to get the kind of volume and the fleet that they would need to gather the kind of data in time. And that's why I think they need to put LiDAR on the R2. It's sort of a shortcut for them in order to be able to train their AI faster. They touched on this very briefly during their Autonomy presentation last month, but essentially this means that every R2 driving around with a LiDAR becomes part of the Penguin fleet. It becomes one of these vehicles that's collecting data that cross-references the depth data that the cameras are getting and makes the AI more accurate when it's understanding what's coming from all of the cameras. The benefit of this has the potential to be absolutely massive for Rivian. It allows them to accelerate their development process so that something that might have taken 4 or 5 years of data collection may only take 1 or 2 years of data collection because they have so much more good, reliable training information to feed into their data flywheel, as they call it. And this isn't just going to benefit the R2 with LiDAR. This is going to benefit every vehicle that's running the Rivian Autonomy stack. Even the older Gen 2 platform that doesn't have a LiDAR on it will benefit from this enhanced training data. Rivian has set some very lofty goals for the levels of autonomy they want to reach, and if they're going to do it in any reasonable amount of time, this is the way to do it. Because without the fleet size and the amount of training data coming in, they just won't be able to get the AI training done quick enough. But this very well could be the magic bullet for them, and honestly, I think it's going to work. That said, even though I think this is the primary motive for them putting the LiDAR in the R2 right now, that doesn't mean there aren't other benefits that come from having the LiDAR on the system as well. This provides an extra level of redundancy. In the world of aviation, there needs to be at least 3 systems running at any given time for some of the highly automated things. So if one of the system fails, but the 2 others agree, then you can still proceed safely because you have some level of redundancy even in the event of a failure. So in this case, we have cameras, we have radars, and we have a LiDAR. And so if one of these systems fails or is blocked, so for example, if there's dense fog that is making it a little bit hard for the camera to see, the LiDAR and the radar might still be able to see something and you still get that level of redundancy. So it's not like this is the only reason that Rivian's putting it in there, but I think it's the primary one for now. Sure, that LiDAR may add a little bit of extra cost to the R2, but the return on investment is going to be huge for Rivian in the amount of training data that they're going to be able to get from this fleet, since this is going to be a high volume selling vehicle, well, at least for Rivian, and they're going to be able to collect so much more data from it. So both for the R2 owners to come and the Gen 2 R1 owners that are going to benefit from this training data, this is kind of a big deal. So what do you think? Did Rivian make the right choice on this? I sure think so. Now let's... It bounces off of his mouth. And I want to word this. Words. We're so close. And the video is done.